Muchas gracias, Tony. I'm glad you changed the names to protect the innocent. But, you said about topping things, I think Senator Feinstein is going to retire in a few years, so we'll see you at the campaign trail, all right? All kidding aside, I am truly honored and humbled to be here at the Latino Leaders Luncheon, and I'm very, very gratified to see that we have a large number of Latino leaders here and a large contingent of students as well. And I just want to recognize the fact that the Washington Center has brought lots of students. I know some of them are from Veracruz and some from Puerto Rico. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to tailor my talk and talk about leadership, about Latino leadership. And it's going to be, in a sense, in a form that I like to call anecdotal with respect to talking a little bit about my life in terms of how there's leaders in every aspect of our life in terms of how they behave and basically help us along the way. Porque this journey of becoming an astronaut and going to space was not a journey of one man, but it was a journey of a familia. It was a journey of teachers. It was a journey of professionals that helped me along the way to achieve a dream. And I'll be talking about that throughout my talk. The one thing I did want to do is I want to recognize our ambassador de Mexico, the Honorable Arturo Sarucan, who was kind enough to accompany and represent our President de Mexico in Kennedy Space Center during our launch. So he represented Presidente Felipe Calderón, and thank you very much for being there with my family. I appreciate it. A lot of people always ask, it says, okay, how did you become an astronaut? What was the process and how did it happen? ¿Cómo pasó? I mean, eres un mexicano del barrio. You grew up in Stockton, California. I mean, how did you get there from there to become an astronaut? And I think it's worth talking a little bit about my life in terms of how it all originated. As most of you know, I come from a typical migrant farm working family from La Piedad, Michoacan. And a lot of people say, well, what's a typical migrant farm working family like? A typical, see, if we would have used NASA Velcro, this wouldn't happen. That's one of the benefits of NASA, right? So if anybody ever asks you what has NASA ever done, we invented Velcro and it works. So what's a typical migrant farm working family like? Well, let me just paint the scenery for you. And a lot of you are going to be able to resonate with my story because a lot of you have very similar experiences. And please tell them I'm not here. What we did was every year around February timeframe, my father, we would be in Michoacan, La Piedad, Michoacan. My father would load up us kids, 4 of us, in the car with my mom, and we would make the 2-day trek up to Southern California. We would start off in Ontario, and we'd start picking strawberries. And from there, we would then work our way up to the Central Valley, up to Salinas, working La Lechuga, El Asadón del Betabel, sugar beet hoeing. And then we would spend the bulk of our time up in Northern California, in Stockton, Modesto, Lodi, and we would work picking cucumbers, picking cherries, picking durazno, peaches, and then we would end the journey with the grapes in the grape season. This would take us about November timeframe. In November, what my parents would then do is they would say, okay, we're going to go back to Mexico. You know, it's tiempo de las fiestas navideñas, so it's not worth it to put you guys in school in Mexico. We want you to get 3 to 4 months worth of homework. This was maestras, and you take it to La Piedad with you, and then we would self-study ourselves there. And then come March, February, March, that whole process would repeat itself. So you can see how difficult it was in the early days for us, for our education process. This happened all the way till I was about 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, because we would go to 3 or 4 different school districts throughout the school year. We would miss 3 or 4 months of school, and then so, you know, what happened to me was that it was tough for me to learn the English language, you know, because we were Spanish speaking in La Familia. Even though I was born in the States, I was speaking Spanish en la casa. Y eso sí, era español de rancho. You know, it wasn't formal Spanish. Era, you know, it was Spanish. And I think what made us different from a typical migrant farming family was the fact that my parents, in spite of their 3rd grade elementary school education, they gave a lot of importance to education. What made them different is that Monday through Friday, they always saw us that we went to school. Wherever we went, eso sí, era 3 or 4 different school districts, but wherever we went, we were enrolled in school. Eso sí, se llegaba sábado y domingo y fregarle en el campo. We would work in the fields Saturday and Sunday. And while every kid loves summer vacation, you know, you can imagine, we dreaded it porque that meant we were going to be out there 7 days a week as opposed to 2 days a week. And so I remember, you know, what started changing things for us. Well, first let me tell you the one thing that my dad was. I think he was a master at getting us motivated. Every day after working in a field, in the fields, we would you know, get in the car. You know, Saturday, Sunday, we'd get in the car and we would have you know, crusted Levi's, because in the morning it's soggy and wet, and so you get mud on your Levi's. By the end of the day, it dries and it's cake baked, so it's stiff. You get in the car, you're all dusty, sweaty, and you're in the back of the car. And every day before he started the car, he would look back at us and he says, "¿Cómo se sienten?" And I said, "Well, we're tired." And I said, "Remember this feeling." He says, "Because if you don't go to school, es lo que van a hacer toda su vida. This is your future if you don't go to school." Very powerful message that sort of stuck to us. I think my mom was more of a I swear if she went to college, she would have been a great psychologist, because mothers have the ability to put the burden on you, to challenge you. Dice, "Ay, mijo," she says, you know, "Ustedes van a tener una mucha mejor vida que nosotros, y ojalá nos puedan ayudar cuando estén grandes," and all that, you know, and you know, there they are, putting the guilt trip on you, right? But the important thing was that she set the bit on us, because she would always talk about college. She would always, when we would go to a nice, clean office, she would see el señor con corbata y todo eso, and she would say, "Mira, así quiero verlos a ustedes, trabajando en una oficina, no trabajando en el campo como nosotros." But she would set the bit, and she would always talk of when we went to college, when we went to the university. She would never say, "If you go." She said, she expected us to go, and that set the bit right away. And to me, those are very powerful messages that they gave. The other thing that they did, which I think was very different from typical migrant farm working families, was they sat down with us every day at home, and we did the homework in the kitchen. And they would, you know, nos arreglaba algo para comer, but she said, "No se levanten hasta que terminen la tarea." And you know, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, that worked fine for them, because they could help us with the homework and all that. You know, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, ya ni papas le entendían ellos, ¿verdad? But they were still smart enough to realize if we finished the homework or not, ¿verdad? And I guess my point is as parents, because I'm a parent of 5 kids, is that we need to spend time with our kids during the homework process. It's not just a matter of telling the kids, "Oye, mijo, corre, haz la tarea y deja ver mi novela," you know, Destilando Amor or whatever. You guys want to see La Gaviota? I'm not sure what novela is out there now, but I remember during time period, that one was a big one. And it doesn't suffice for the fathers to go out con los amigos afuera del arbolito y tomar unas cervezas. You know, the whole thing is you got to engage and you gotta be a family, and you gotta be together. Because a lot of times, we put the burden a lot on the public school system, but you know what? It starts in the family. If the family has to start that process, and then we can then point to the school system and say, okay, why isn't my kid doing this? Once you answer the question that I'm doing everything at home to make sure my son succeeds or my daughter succeeds, then I think we can hold the public school system accountable, but it starts at home. The other thing that happened during my education system, as you know, we would go up and down California. What happened in terms of what made us stop doing what I call the California circuit was a visit by a second grade teacher. It was amazing. I'm the youngest of 4 in my family, and it was November. It was time to go. I was in the second grade. It was time to go back to Mexico. And my dad said, okay, arreglen las cosas, and nos vamos, agarren sus tareas. Of course, I went to my second grade teacher, and at that time, era una chinita, fresh off of college, very young, beautiful, and she was tall. I was in second grade, so she seemed tall. Ahora la veo and está bien chaparrita, but she was tall at that time, and I told her, and I asked her, I said, hey, we're gonna go to Mexico. Can I have can I have 3 or 4 months worth of homework? And of course, she had been through that with my other 3 siblings. She's been through that process. I saw her roll her eyes, and she said, you know what, Jose, tell your parents I'm going to be home tonight. I'm going to go visit your house. Y yo dije, okay, está bien, señor. Of course, I went running home that day to tell my parents, trying to give them as much notice as possible. And we lived about a mile and a half from the school. Y en ese tiempo, you could walk to school for a mile and a half. Now we'll get arrested if we have our child walk a mile to school, right? But in ese tiempo, we go through tracks and everything, and we ran home to school. So I ran home, and of course, you get home, you get 2 different reactions from your parents. Okay, first thing I tell my dad, va a venir la maestra, and of course he says, ¿Qué hiciste, muchacho? What'd you do? What kind of trouble do you get into now? No, va a venir, va a hablar no sé de qué, porque le dije que íbamos a ir a México. And okay, the other reaction is completely opposite. La mamá, va a venir la maestra, hay que limpiar la casa, hay que hacer tortillas de harina, and hay que hacer comida para darle de comer a la maestra. You know how mothers are, right? Especially Mexican mothers. They want to be as hospitable as possible, and they prepare the dinner and everything. And okay, so what that happened, and the teacher came. The teacher came and gave and in her broken Spanish, my parents' broken English. They got the message together in a language that my parents could understand. And I remember her saying, han de plantar raíces en un lugar. Set roots in one place. Dice, porque tienen hijos que son muy inteligentes, les gusta la escuela, y denles una chance para que puedan estudiar. Give them a chance so they can study. And to my parents' credit, we took that to heed. He took that to heed, that advice to heed, and we started making stock in our home. Eso sí, for a migrant farm worker to stay in one place, that's tough because farm work is not available year-round in one particular place. And I remember mi pobre papá used to go out in the tule fog in the middle of winter when it was cold and freezing, and he would go and work in La Poda, and pruning cherry trees, peach trees, and all that, and just to make ends meet. So it wasn't an easy life after that, but it was a sacrifice that he made that we realized that he was making. And so what happened was, unfortunately, I have to confess that I'm old enough to remember the tail end of the Apollo program, and so I was about 7, 8 years old when the Apollo program was going on. And of course, everybody during that time saw the astronauts on TV as they walked on the moon, right? And we were no different. The only difference is we had the old consola TVs with the integrated speakers, las cuatro patitas, blanca y negra, and a very fuzzy, snowy picture. Que a veces, sometimes you get that horizontal bar that you would have to go like that so that it stops. You guys remember that, right? That was our TV. We also, of course, the satellite didn't exist at that time. And also, we couldn't afford cable, so we had the what we call the rabbit ear antennas, right? So whenever something happened that was very important, first of all, we didn't have a remote. So, guess who the remote was for youngest in the family, which was yours truly, cambiar el canal y a subirle volumen y todo eso. I would do it all. And then, of course, when something important happened, my dad would ask me, muchachos, ajusta la antena para get a better reception. Of course, and then what happens when you go and you grab the antenna? You get good ground, right? An electrical engineer, I knew that. You get good ground, and so what does your dad tell you? Ay, quédate, deja vernos. So I'm doing in forma contorsionista, trying to look at the image as I'm adjusting the TV to make sure I get a glimpse of the astronauts as well. And now I kid with my siblings. I said, yeah, ven, it was through osmosis, that the signals went through my brain, and that's how I became an astronaut. The astronauts came through me, ya ven, por eso. That's why I became an astronaut. And so, but that's really, truly when the dream was born, is that I was about 8 years old when I first saw the astronauts walking on the moon. And the images I saw, you hear them talking, and you hear that beep, and it's 1/6 the gravity, so they're kind of like floating in slow motion. And then I would run outside, and you would see the full moon. And I'd see it, I run inside, I see the astronauts walking on the moon. I would do the same thing again and do that. And I'm sure every 8, 9-year-old at that time was fascinated and wanted to be an astronaut as well. And so what happened with me was I got hooked on that. I said, I'm going to be an astronaut. And of course, I shared that dream with my parents. And to their credit, they allowed me to dream. That's the other thing that we don't do. We don't allow our kids to dream. Sometimes we put our own barriers in front of us, and we don't allow our kids to dream. And my parents were very supportive and said, así, mijo, just study hard and y lo puedes lograr. I'm sure in the back of their mind estaban diciendo, pobrecito, deja que sueñe, pero hay que animarlo. Let's encourage him. He doesn't stand a chance, but let's not break his bubble. But I was naive enough. To think that I could get selected. That it was not an impossible dream, and I kept working towards that. I kept saying that's what I'm going to do. And what happened? Here's another thing, the power of mentors. Even if you don't know the mentors, just by example, I was a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate. I knew I was going to University of Pacific to major in engineering because math, English was not my strongest suit. It was math because of the inability of learning English in the early years. I migrated to math, and 2 + 2 is 4 in cualquier idioma. And so I knew I was going to major in engineering. But then I heard some astounding news, and that was that Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz got selected as an astronaut. Okay, the name Chang no me pareció, ¿verdad? Chang, ¿qué onda? But then I heard Diaz. I said, wow, that sounds like Hernandez, Diaz. I wonder if he's Latino. And I started looking at his bio, and I noticed that he was the first Latino American astronaut to get selected by NASA, had a PhD, and he came from humble beginnings, just like me, but he came from Costa Rica. Entonces me dio envidia. I was jealous. Pero envidia de la buena, the good type of jealousy. I said, si este vato pudo, ¿por qué yo no? Why can't, if he was able to do it, why can't I? I mean, he seems like a homie like me, so I'm gonna go ahead and so that's when I gave the promise to myself, personal promise, that I was going to do everything in my power to get selected as an astronaut. I said, if that means going to graduate school and getting advanced degrees, that's what I was going to do. And of course, that's when I had the blessing of meeting my good friend Tony Cardenas, who hopefully encouraged him to run for mayor, but don't run for Senate. Okay, ahí te gano, no te creas. I'm just kidding there, but so what happened? So what happened was then I went ahead and finished graduate school and started working at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and there basically I worked on in my career worked on 3 major projects there. I worked in a Star Wars project, the development of an X-ray laser, which meant electronic equipment being deployed up in space. So that allowed me to learn about orbital mechanics. Second one was working on a mammography project, developing the first full-field digital mammography project for the early detection of breast cancer. This opened up a whole new field of study in developing cancer detection algorithms for images in digital image processing. So we worked with a company in Denver, Colorado, Fisher Imaging, and helped them develop the first full-field digital mammography system. And the third was full circle. I worked with the Russians. I spent 2 years here at Department of Energy working in the nuclear non-proliferation arena, where we basically helped the Russians dispose of nuclear material. And so in that process, я понимаю по-русски, I was able to learn a little bit of Russian. And the reason why I did that is that during this whole time, I was applying for the NASA for astronaut program. And every year I would ask myself, okay, Jose, what have you done differently to make yourself more attractive, more marketable to NASA to become an astronaut? And if I couldn't answer that question, I say, you're slacking, dude. You got to do something different, and you got to improve yourself. And so that's why it wasn't a accident that I started working in the Star Wars project, because that was space related. Medical, the more you know about your body and medicine, the better the NASA likes it, because there's a lot of self-care, self-management, self-medication up in space when you don't have a doctor. And then the nuclear non-proliferation project, I worked because it was during that time that the US and Russia had signed an agreement to develop an international space station. And I put 2 and 2 together right away. I said, you know what? Vamos a estar trabajando con los rusos allá. So when this project came up to work with the Russians and learn the Russian language and culture, I jumped on it because I said, that's what's going to make me more attractive to NASA. And I applied for 6 straight years, and I would always get a form letter that says, hey, don't call us, we'll call you. And it wasn't until the 6th year that I got interviewed. The way the process works is there's over 4,000 people that apply to the NASA program for the astronauts. Out of those 4,000, they down select 300. They check your references. Out of those 300, they'll select 100 lucky ones that get interviewed for 1 full week at NASA. These 100 people get invited, and of course you get a battery of psychological exams. You get a battery of physical exams where you get poked and prodded everywhere, and those males over 40 know what I'm talking about. And then you get interviewed by a committee. You get interviewed by a committee, and then everybody goes home, and you wait until you hear the results, and then of course, you know, I sort of got cocky because I said, okay, pues ya la hice, I'm in the final 40s, me van a seleccionar. Of course, I got the news and I didn't get selected. And then, so the next 2 years went by for the next selection. I got selected, I got interviewed again year 8, and the same thing happened. You know, went down to the 40 finalists, and ni mangos, I didn't get anything. Yeah. I did get an invitation though. I was finishing up my 2-year rotation here, getting ready to go back to California at Lawrence Livermore Lab. And when I got the news that I didn't get selected year 8, but I did get the invitation to go work for NASA as a civil servant. I was a contractor for DOE at Lawrence Livermore Lab, pero you know, it came with some caveats. They said, well, you need to come back. You need to come work for us as an engineer. There's no guarantees that we'll even interview you again. We just want to have a better look at you. So you know, we're making clear that we're not even going to guarantee that we're going to interview you. And by the way, you got to take a pay cut, and you got to move to Houston. Well, you can see how well that went over with my wife, in a sense of saying, hey, honey, you know, we're not going to nice weather California. We're going to hot and muggy Houston. And by the way, you can't spend more money. You got to tighten up the belt. But in all honesty, though, she was actually the one that encouraged me, because I was always look out for the family first, because that's the thing I was saying. You know, I had 13 years at Lawrence Livermore Lab, had a nice career going, nice trajectory, which is why they brought me to DOE, so I can go back and manage a program when I came back. And so I had to give all that up. And my wife told me something that I would never forget. She says, you know, siempre vas a tener el gusanito. She's from Cotija, Michoacan, so She would say this in Spanish. Vas a tener el gusanito. You're always going to have that little worm inside you that's always going to be asking you, gnawing at you, saying, what if, if you didn't take that job, what would have happened? Because it was obvious that if I didn't take that job, they weren't going to consider me in the future. And so that sort of stuck with me. And she said, don't disqualify yourself. Let them disqualify you. So don't make that decision of not going. She said, let's go. We'll make ends meet, and we'll do all right in Houston. If you don't like it, then we'll go back to California. And so I took that risk in year 8. Moved the family to Houston. That was about 2000. And of course, found out with the understanding that there was going to be a selection in 2002. Well, they canceled that selection, and there wasn't a selection until 2004. So what ended up being a 2-year experiment was a 4-year experiment. But I started working there and put in 4 good years. Ended up being the branch chief of Materials and Processes branch, and we actually had the shuttle accident that we had in Colombia, and my group was, because we do non-destructive testing, so we do forensics. My group was very instrumental in doing the reconstruction of the accident and finding the root cause. So it sort of gave me visibility at the management level that when the new selections came by in 2004, when I was actually selected. So it was 12 years after I started applying, 3 interviews before I finally got selected as a NASA astronaut in 2004. And obviously, when you first get selected as an astronaut in 2004, you're not eligible for flight assignment because you're just coming off the street. So you get the title is actually astronaut candidate, and you train for 2 years, which was 2006, when we graduated and we became what we call card-carrying astronauts, where we were eligible for a flight assignment. 2008 was when I got my first assignment, which is STS-128, to fly on board Discovery. And the date for the flight was last year. We trained for about 14 months as a group, as a crew of 7. We trained for 14 months, and we actually executed the 128th mission of the space shuttles, and ours was Discovery, which was the 32nd mission. And flew from August 28th to September 11th. During those 14 days, we were up in space and went around the Earth 217 times at approximately 17,500 miles an hour, and traveled a total of 5.7 million miles. There's 2 things I always say about that is I wish there was a frequent flyer program for that. And for the ladies, tengo mucho kilometraje, pero don't worry about that, all right? I have a lot of mileage, but don't worry about that. The experience of going up in space is I mean, you just cannot put words into it. I mean, it's just one of the most awesome feelings in the world. And let me just lay the groundwork for the launch. You dress up in your orange pumpkin pressurized suit, you get strapped in the seat, and there's about 3 hours of nice quiet time that you could even take cat naps before the launch counts down to 0. And you're down there, and you have time to make peace with your maker, if you will, and start reflecting. And one of the best feelings I had there was I was sitting there, I was looking at my suits, looking at my partners there, and I was saying, when I was my son's age, my son's 15, I was out picking cucumbers during the summers. I said, now I'm here representing the United States as an astronaut. Man, how cool is that? It truly is a great country where you can make dreams a reality. And as the count progressed, it progressed to 0, and you go from dead silence, quiet, all of a sudden everything rattling and rolling, lots of noise, and I don't remember, but my I'm a mission specialist one. I'm the flight engineer, so I sit right behind the two pilots. I get the best seat in the house, and I'm also the busiest during those 8.5 minutes of the most dynamic phase of flight, reaching space. But my neighbor said that as soon as it started taking off and everything, and you feel the thrust as you finally go, he said que me persiné. I don't remember, pero no me consta que I probably did. I'm a religious man, so I'm sure I did. But, so I guess you can say for that millisecond, did I feel scared? Yeah, I probably did for that millisecond. I did say to myself, what did I get myself into? As it started rattling and rolling. But then after that, you feel a thrust, and you're off the ground. You see the pad pass behind, on the side of you, and the tower, and then your training takes over. It's amazing. You program, your training takes over. You start hawking all the instruments, start making sure you're making the milestones during those 8.5 minutes of dynamic flight. I call it the best Disneyland e-ticket ride ever. And you reach space in those 8.5 minutes, and all of a sudden you're floating. Things are just floating. Everything quiets down, and now you're going 17,500 miles an hour around the Earth, which is truly amazing, truly amazing. And we joined with the International Space Station. Took us one day to get close to it and dock to it. We performed 3 main objectives. We traded one of our crew members, Nicole Stott, a woman engineer. We traded her for another person who had been up there for 4 months. Tim Copra, brought him home. We conducted 3 spacewalks, and then we also transferred 7 tons of material and equipment, including exercise equipment for the crew that's going to stay on the International Space Station. During that time, that dock time, there were 7 of us from the shuttle, 6 from the station, total of 13 astronauts up there. It's an International Space Station that's completely built now, as of the last mission, the size of about 5-bedroom home, and there was 13 of us there. Didn't feel crowded at all, representing 5 countries. I always say 6 countries if you include Mexico, because I always put a plug in for Mexico there. And so what happened was we conducted our mission for those 14 days, undocked, and came home and had a flawless landing. Ended up landing at Edwards Air Force Base. Our preference is to land in Florida, Kennedy Space Center, but the weather didn't allow it, so we went over there. 3 hours later, I was at a place in Boron called Domingos. A friend of mine owns the restaurant. I took the whole crew there. Estaba comiendo comida mexicana con una cerveza. So life was good. I just want to close up a little bit with respect to, in terms of my closing remarks, to tell you that, some of the things, a lot of people ask me, well, what are you going to do now, Jose? How can you top that? And I'm sure Tony is trembling in his seat right now. But I won't break it to him just yet, but we'll keep that. No, actually, I'm going to be moving down here to Houston for a 6-month to 1-year assignment at NASA headquarters. I'm going to be working out of the Office of Legislative Affairs and try to work with our lawmakers with respect to spreading the good word of what NASA does with respect to our mission and objectives. As you know, President Obama changed the mission objectives of NASA just recently. We're actually pretty excited about it. A lot of people think that the budget got cut. On the contrary, I think the budget got increased. The International Space Station, which was slated to close in 2015, got extended to 2020, so we're going to be conducting a lot more science. What did get changed a lot is that constellation program that we were working on. It was a Apollo-like architecture capsule that was going to take us to the International Space Station, but take us to the moon, where we would set up a long-duration base outpost there and learn how to live on the moon for long durations in hopes of developing the technology that eventually allows us to go to Mars. That got scrapped. And instead of doing that, what he's doing is the resources for that program is going to be spread among private companies so that we can stimulate private companies and technology to get commercialized so that these companies can develop their own vehicles. And we would have access to these vehicles, and it's in the hopes that things will move a lot quicker and it'll be cheaper to develop. And so we're pretty excited about that, and we'll certainly be working with them in the future to make sure that that's a success. The other thing that I've done is I take my role just like being the mentor that Franklin Chang Diaz was for me. I take my role as a mentor very seriously. To close the story with Franklin Chang Diaz, when I got interviewed the third time in 2004, and remember I said you get interviewed by a committee. Well, he was on the committee, and I was able to meet him for the first time and basically told him the story during my interview process of how I got inspired. Maybe I was just kissing up, but it certainly worked. And so what happened was, it's very important. Role models are very important, and so that's why I take my position very seriously with respect to coming out to the community. I was telling Tony that this Friday I was here for the Head Start Migrant Head Start Conference. I was their keynote speaker. I flew to Sacramento Saturday. I was at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I was their keynote speaker. Flew Sunday back to Houston. We watched The Lightning Thief, my kids and I. And then as soon as the movie was over, dropped them off home again, and I flew over here for this conference. So I certainly do take my role very seriously about being a role model and talking to the kids and encouraging them to stay in school. So much that I have a foundation called Reaching for the Stars. Jose Hernandez Reaching for the Stars. You Google that, you'll see the website to that foundation. That what we try to do with that foundation is very simple. Is we're trying to increase the number of kids going into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It behooves us to increase those numbers, because if we're going to be number one, stay at the number one position from a technical perspective, we need to increase that the amount of kids going into science and engineering, especially minorities, Hispanics. And so a lot of people, I know there's a lot of talk about immigration reform and all this that needs to be done, but one statistic, I was reading a paper the other day by the National Council La Raza. So Ron Estrada, thank you for providing that data. One piece of data that sort of astounded me, blew me away, was that if you look at our population of kids less than 18 years old, 91% are US born or citizens, 91%. So what I'm telling you is that, we can talk about immigration reform, till the cows come home. But 15, 20 years from now, that ain't gonna matter, because we're here to stay. We're not gonna go back home or anywhere. I mean, we are here. Right? Our kids were born here. They're citizens. And if we're going to continue to be competitive in this world, we have to engage all segments of society to get a good education. And that includes our Latino kids. We have to engage them. And specifically, we have to engage them in the STEM areas. Get them involved in science, because that's what makes our country great. That's what is able to make us go to the moon and come back. That's what's going to enable us to go to Mars and come back. So that's what we have to do, is we have to keep motivating our kids to move forward and get a good education. So having said that, it's basically a simple recipe for success. You have to get yourself first of all, it starts at home, the foundation. The foundation support starts at home. You have to have a dream. Allow your kids to dream and convert that dream to a plan. And then provide a good education for them. And perseverance, ganas, corazón, and you put all those ingredients together, like Tony Cardenas said, sky's not the limit, son las estrellas. So thank you very much.
Jose Hernandez, on behalf of the Latino Leaders Network, it's my honor to present you the Nambe Eagle Leadership Award for your outstanding contribution to our community.
Thank you very much. There's one question I wanted to ask Mickey is, are they going to let me on board as carry-on?
We'll send this to you.
Thank you very much. I am truly humbled by the award. Believe me, I take it very serious, the responsibilities that we all have as Latino leaders to go back to our community and give back. Es lo más importante que podemos hacer. We're going to leave a legacy. That's what it has to be. We have to go back y ayudar a nuestra gente subir para arriba. So it's a great honor, and I'm deeply touched. Mickey, thank you very much for bestowing this honor. I mean, I really do appreciate it, and it will be prominently displayed in my study, so muchas gracias.
Thank you.
The one thing I want to present the Latino Leaders Network, Mickey, is a montage of our mission. And if you can see, I'd like to show it to you. It shows several pictures, different phases of our mission that occurred from August 28th to September 11th. More importantly, it has our flag, the American flag, in the center. This flag flew with us, and as I mentioned before, it went around the world 217 times, 5.7 million miles. And I am very proud to present this montage to Mickey Ibarra and the Latino Leaders Network.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, what an outstanding leader. You talk about a lesson in perseverance and patience. I think that would be Jose Hernandez. Thank you so much. Just a couple of closing announcements we'd like to make. As is our custom, we have a number of sponsor materials, media partner materials outside the ballroom for all of you. Please take what interests you. Again, we want to thank Anheuser-Busch and ExxonMobil for making today possible. We look forward to continuing to bring leaders together at the very next Latino Leaders Luncheon Series, as Michelle mentioned, on May 4th. Finally, I want to let everyone know that Jose Hernandez has agreed to personalize the photos that were left on your chairs for those that would be patient, and we'll have him for 30 minutes following this program outside the ballroom. Again, thank you all for being with us today.